TJ, the good for you guy, and I am here with, I have to say, one of my most favorite herbal crushes, we'll say. Rosemary Gladstar. I have been studying her for a long time. I have several books at home. Thought I was going to bring one with me and get her to sign in, and I forgot it, but that's okay. So she is amazing. She's got several books on the market that have all types of herbal remedy recipes. She has been teaching around for a long time. I mean, years. We used her in school as one of our go-tos. So anyway, ladies and gentlemen, Rosemary Gladstar.
Hi, it's an honor to be here with you, CJ.
And it's such a privilege for me to be here with you as well. So tell our viewers a little bit about you. Some of them probably already know quite a bit, but what got you into herbs and that sort of thing?
Oh, you know, I always say I was one of the lucky ones. When I was very young, my grandmother, who was from Armenia, she was actually a genocide survivor, she lived very close to us, and she had an enormous influence on me, and as well as on my brothers and sisters. But she used to tell us when we were children growing up that it was really her knowledge of the plants and her faith in God that saved their lives, and she meant that literally. So I think she used to feel it was almost like her religious duty to take her grandchildren and show them the wild plants that she had known to eat and to use as food and medicine. So even from the time I was just a really small child, I had this love of plants and sort of grew up, I grew up on a dairy farm in Sonoma County, and so I was close to the plants all the time. And by the time I was in the 7th and 8th grade, my school projects were on, wild plants in Sonoma County, Native American uses of plants, and I just it was in my blood, I think. And in truth, all around the world, there are people like myself who that information is just handed down and has been handed down for generations. So I was just in line and I said yes, and it's been an unbelievable, incredible journey for me. I've been so blessed to have been chosen, I feel, to work with the plants.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, it definitely shows. I mean, for some of the videos and things that we've seen, some of the classes we've seen you teach, and just I myself having several of the books that you have and that I use actually as resource material too to go back to as well. It's just, it's amazing. It's fantastic information. And herbs are amazing plants. I mean, they're amazing medicine. And tell us a little bit more about them as medicine instead of just as, a lot of people think herbs and they think culinary and cooking.
Well, really, if you cook with plants, you're actually, I always say you already are a practicing herbalist, because in your kitchen closet are some of the world's most powerful medicines. That's how they got into our food in the first place. It's not necessarily because they taste really delicious and that, we've associated the flavors with food, but that's only after generations of using them. So our ancestors chose those plants to use with foods for particular reasons. So a lot of them had antibacterial, antimicrobial properties like turmeric and ginger. Some of them like basil. We always think of basil every time you think of, tomatoes and Italian food. But the reason that you use basil with tomatoes, the reason it was paired was because basil aids the digestion of the acids, which are hard to digest. So all of those culinaries were added, and added to our foods because they had very particular purposes that weren't just about flavor. As I said, we've adapted to those flavors because we've been eating them for centuries. Right. And so now, imagine tomatoes without a little fresh basil. It's kind of hard, right?
Right.
And the only difference that makes them a culinary or medicine is really in the dosage. So like if I need a really strong antimicrobial, antibacterial, I could choose thyme, but instead of just using a little sprinkle, I use like a teaspoon or a tablespoon. So it's really just the dosage and also the preparation that makes it different. But one of the things I always like people to know is that we think of herbs as medicine, and it's a beautiful system. It's our oldest system in the world. It's still the most widely used system. The World Health Organization states that over 82% of the world's population uses herbs as a primary system. And I always say, well, it's even more than that, because that statistic is outdated. It's actually from the late 1980s. Oh. Yeah, so, and when you look at the rise in use in just America,
the resurgence, of herbs.
So it's probably up to around 90%. But so herbs do serve as a really good system of healing, and they are very complementary to our modern allopathic medicine. But I always really like people to know that it's really more a way of life. It's really more about health than sickness. It's really about, and it's not just even about our physical health, but when you start to work with plants, even somebody who goes into the garden and they're not even thinking about the medicine of the plants, but they're just in communion and they feel better. I would say you don't really meet very many grumpy gardeners because they go in, and we could say on a physiological level it might be the essential oils or the colors or whatever, but really I always feel it's this deep soulful relationship that we have with the plants, and really we've had with them since the very beginning of human evolution.
Right.
So the medicine is really about life and living, and when people work with plants, either as gardeners, farmers, beauticians, cooks, chefs, or medicinal herbalists, that's that vitality of the plants that actually fills us up and gives us joy.
Yeah, I agree with that too. I think, growing up on a farm as well for a few years before my dad joined the military and we moved on, you would go outside and there was, just all types of plants, herbs, and of course there was fruit, grapes and things like that. But then it was, of course, all the, what would be considered food, like fennel, we cook with. But in the herbal world, it's really used as a great digestive as well.
Yeah.
So it's interesting now looking back, at the food that was grown in the garden, and then start looking at it as, oh wow, this was actually, medicine. And I said there is something to that whole grandmother's chicken soup, thing.
Oh, absolutely.
Because one, her love and energy would go into it, when you're sick. But the other side of that is also what went in it, from a clinical standpoint. Some of the herbs and things that would go in there would have helped with digestion and things of that nature. So it is amazing how those two worlds collide pretty heavily, and it does play a lot in our nutritional health. So from your standpoint, what are some of your favorite herbs and why?
Well, so we're not just talking about the culinary herbs, yeah. So I'd say my number one favorite plant is nettle, which always gets a chuckle. But I grew up as I said, on a farm, and so nettle was something you kind of stayed away from. But I've learned to love it, and I love it because it has a very interesting personality. So it has kind of it has those prickles. If you touch it, you get big welts on you. But those welts actually are formic acid, and they actually are medicine, and they still are, but definitely the earlier doctors and herbalists would do what was called urtication. So if you had arthritis or bursitis, stiffness of the joints, the doctor would take fresh nettle and tap it around that area, and it would create a histamine reaction, and that actually would cause your body to send blood and then heal that area, and it worked really well. So that isn't the reason I love it. I love it because it's unbelievably nutritious. It has far more calcium, vitamin A, iron than almost anything that we grow, and it's delicious. You have to steam it. That's a really thing. You have to pick it with gloves until you learn to pick it without, but I always would say as beginners you want to pick it with gloves. And you just steam it, and this is one vegetable you want to steam well, because those little prickles inside that contain the formic acid, they're like little needles. If you don't steam it well, you can get a little sting in your mouth, and that's not really pleasant. So it's good. It's good to steam it well. But then once you have that green, it tastes far better than spinach. I might venture to say even kale, for all the kale lovers. And you can use it in omelets, and you can use it in spanakopita's, those wonderful Greek spinach pies. I just love it. But also it's a wonderful medicine for many of the organ systems. So for allergies and asthma, it's a major medicine, and for the reproductive system and the digestion, so the liver and the blood. It's just, you have this herb that's food, that's medicine, tenacious, it grows wild, I think
you have a pickled version.
I have a pickled one. Yeah, I have so many. I do pickled nettle. And then I also make a raw, fresh nettle where you don't steam it. You just take fresh nettle, and it's almost as good as a basil pesto.
Really?
Yeah, almost as good. You should try this. So you take your favorite basil pesto recipe, and pesto basically just means herb paste, so you can use anything. And you put raw nettle in the blender with your olive oil and your nuts, and if you can afford pine nuts, I usually use walnut or cashew, and then you can add a little bit of maybe a quarter part of basil, or a little thyme, or a rosemary, a little bit of culinary to give it just that little more pungent taste. And then you just blend it, and you have this, fabulous green paste that's like food, but really some of your best medicine for people who are depleted. It's
now,
just
how do you avoid the little needles then?
Well, because when the blender spins, or your processor spins, it breaks those needles up, and so it's no longer able to prick you. You don't get it. So yeah, isn't it cool?
That's pretty cool.
It's very cool. We
I
call
wouldn't
that
have thought of that.
Nesto.
Nesto. I love that. Nesto.
Yeah, it's a good one.
That's fantastic. Wow. So would you say, I read a book, and I believe, and I can't remember his name, but he has the Herbal Maker's Handbook.
let's see.
I don't remember his name now. I want to say Green.
Oh, James Green,
James
yeah,
Green.
The Medicine Maker's Handbook.
The Medicine Maker's Handbook. There
Yeah,
you
that's
go.
a fabulous book.
It's wonderful. And
Yeah.
in there, they list several, like 35 herbs that, as an herbalist, you should have. He said, but we always argued when we were putting this list together because, one herbalist would have, several different herbs than another person. Yet we always had some of the similar ones, but some of them it was for different purposes. So, what would say be your top 5 for medicinal purposes,
Yeah.
aside from the nettle, obviously?
Right.
But what would you say your top 5 would be that would bring forth, kind of overall good health?
Great. So that my top 5 might change a little bit, but I would say and I'm thinking for a large population.
Right.
So echinacea, because it's generally safe for everybody to use, and it's a very effective first defense for the immune system. And it generally works for people. Occasionally, because it's a composite, occasionally people get rashes to it, but not frequently. So you have this wonderful, beautiful plant you can grow in your garden, and then you can use the root, the leaves, and the flowers. The whole aerial part of the plant
Wow.
is all medicinal. And the leaves and the flowers actually have higher antimicrobial properties than the root.
Wow. No,
Yeah,
no,
so
no.
we like to make like a total echinacea where you use the whole plant, and you have a superior immune stimulant, where it actually activates white blood cells. They're able to recognize, the surface kinds of things like bacteria and virus that get in, and they can generally stop it. So a really good idea would be, like if you're flying, and being in planes for hours is not healthy for anybody.
Right.
You're breathing recirculated air. So I always recommend taking echinacea before you go. Or if you're working in the office and everybody's got coughs, you take echinacea, so it's great. So I would say echinacea, yarrow, I would really highly recommend.
Yarrow is good for fever, right?
Yeah, it's a diaphoretic, so it helps. What it does is it actually spikes your fever, it makes you sweat, and it opens up the pores, and so it helps your fever to break, and it's extremely effective for that, and it's been used for centuries as a diaphoretic. It's also one of the best hemostats that we have, where it will stop bleeding. So like if you have a really bad nosebleed and it's very, you can't stop it, you put a little powder of yarrow up your nose. It sounds bizarre,
Not
but
at all.
or you can take fresh yarrow and you mash it up and you put just a little bit up there, not to plug your nose up, but just enough, and it will stop the bleeding. Or a wound, like a better example would be you get a big cut, and maybe you even have to run to the hospital, it's so big, but in the meantime you just pack some fresh yarrow in there and it will stop the bleeding. It's pretty remarkable.
Wow.
And it also does that internally, so we recommend it for women who have heavy menstrual cycles to help regulate that so you're not bleeding.
Would you take that also as a tea too?
Yes, it's usually used as a tea, and for that a tea or a tincture. And for people who might have some injury where they're bleeding internally, and as a first aid as you're getting to the hospital, it's a wonderful herb, and it grows wild everywhere, and it's also a bitter tonic. So as a chef and because your love of food, that one of the things that we're really missing from our American diet
Bitters.
are bitters. So I'm really excited to see bitters becoming popular again in America, because bitters are one of the very best things that people can do when they have digestive issues. So yarrow is a digestive bitter.
Nice.
So
Okay.
we have this beautiful plant. So, okay, we've got through 2. There's, 3, nettle, echinacea, yarrow, and then another herb that I love is ginger. And it's a very common, and this is the same ginger that you get at a grocery store, You can grow it in pots, and in tropical and warm areas like Florida where you live, you
Right.
can actually grow it outdoors. So that rhizome is a fabulous disinfectant. It also is used for any kind of cramping, so like stomach cramps, menstrual cramps, also morning sickness. And then it's a warming herb for the system, so it's what we call a warming circulatory herb. It helps blood carry through the body, and it warms your body, so it's really good for colds. And for people who aren't familiar or don't want to try, some of the tinctures and herbal medicine, just brewing up a nice ginger tea with lemon and honey, you have a really nice remedy. It tastes delicious. You can serve it cold in the summertime. Yeah, it's really good.
Oh
So-
wow. And what would your 5th one be?
Okay, so my 5th one would be, I'm just trying to think, the list is so I mean,
vast.
Yeah, so I would probably say lemon balm. I mean, lemon balm is screaming at my head right now. So is peppermint and chamomile and golden seal. But well, let's stop with lemon balm. And again, I'm trying to choose ones that have a lot
And that's
of
also
uses.
known as Melissa, correct?
Yeah, Melissa.
Yes, Melissa.
Melissa officinalis.
Officinalis.
So it belongs to the mint family, and in the entire mint family of hundreds of different mints. Peppermint, spearmint, yerba buena, that's the official, the ones that have officinalis as part of their botanical name.
Right.
It's the medicine of the family, what's considered the major medicine. So in that entire mint family, this sweet little plant that we use for making cordials and teas, it just tastes so good, is actually the official medicine. And the reason being is it's a major antiviral. So for viral infections, which are very hard, like people get shingles and herpes simplex 1 and all the nasty places that shingles show up.
Right.
This is the major medicine sold in Europe is Melissa. If you go to a pharmacy, that's the drug they're going to give you.
Now, would they give that to you in a tincture, or would they give it to you more in an ointment? Or
They usually give it in an ointment and a cream, and it's applied topically. But really, what I found is that if people who are prone to like shingles outbreaks or herpes outbreaks, if they just drink lemon balm on a regular basis, because it's a nervine, it's calming to the nervous system, and it helps to feed and nourish the nervous system, they have far fewer outbreaks. And some people have reported no more outbreaks. So,
wow.
And that's such a major problem for people. So it's good to know that. I usually combine it with licorice root.
Oh, yeah.
It's a really good one too. But the lemon balm is great. And there is one counterindication with using lemon balm is that people have low thyroid. It can suppress the thyroid activity, so it's not recommended for people who are on medication for hypothyroidism.
Hypothyroid.
Yeah, Yeah, it's used for high. People have overactive thyroids, but not underactive. So that's important. I mean, it doesn't mean if you have a glass
cup of tea or something,
it's not going to bother you, but it's not a remedy that you're going to want to use long term
regularly,
because it can impact the medication.
Wow, that is so. I could sit here and talk to you for days. I could. But obviously, we don't have that kind of time. So I'd like for you to give our viewers maybe one last little quote or something that you think would help them, maybe even introduce them to herbalism if they've never used herbs for anything before other than cooking.
Thank you. Well, I'd like to say that, it seems like anytime you enter into a subject, and especially one so old and vast, it can be overwhelming, but people need to remember, people have been using herbs for thousands of years. It's actually a very, very easy science and art to learn. It's not difficult. It's not like you have to start off, and you never have to be a good herbalist, you don't have to know botanical names, you don't have to know chemical constituents. You just have to know a few herbs, and really I usually suggest learn 10 herbs well, bring them into your home, have them in your herbal first aid kit, and have 2 or 3 good references. Simple books that
And the good references come from Rosemary Gladstar. They're awesome. However, I will say that Herbal Medicine Maker's Handbook is really good.
It's a good one. There's so many good herb books. Thank you. There's so many good herb books out there today, but you want to get ones that are written for beginners that help you understand the system, and just 3 so that you can reference each of the herbs in it, and then you begin to use them. You look at recipes and you think, I'll make this for my upset stomach, I'll try this for my cold. And you begin to see exactly what your grandparents and your great-grandparents, how they use these plants and how they're still effective. So that, I think, is probably the biggest message I'd like to share with people. It's really easy to learn it. And I can say that with a lot of confidence. I've been teaching people for over 40 years. And, really after 1 or 2 classes, you start to see people go, oh, I'm getting it, I understand it, because it's actually very simple. If you want to be a medical practitioner and go into it as a profession, then like any profession, there is a lot to learn. But doing herbs for home health care, taking care of your family and yourself, maybe a few of your neighbors that are interested, it's in our blood. We know this. It's been passed down for generations. So we just have to access information, and then we get to be herbalists again.
Which I think is amazing. I think that's just such a great opportunity for so many of us to really take advantage of herbs again and utilize them for the plant medicine they are. And like she said, when you're harvesting them, harvest them with intent and really, show the planet, your energy and your positive connectedness to it. So I think that's very important.
I didn't say that, you did, but that is brilliant. And that is one of the things that I have dedicated the last 20 years of my life to, is to plant conservation, because we've seen herbalism become so popular, and that's really exciting, but it's really engendered a different set of problems, and that's that we need to be responsible consumers. I hate that term consumer. We need to be responsible citizens, really,
Right.
you know, and we need to be thoughtful about where these plants are coming from, because we don't have endless supplies of our wild sources. We do have endless supplies of our good cultivated, organically cultivated sources. So we really are stressing that people use organically cultivated herbs, except for your weedy species like dandelion.
Dandelion.
Dandelion needs to be on that list too. Oh my God, add dandelion to that list of 6 favorites.
So, so what is the name of you actually have a retreat center, don't you? Or a
Yeah, I do. Up
school?
in northern Vermont, we have a 500-acre botanical sanctuary where we actually have replanted a lot of the wild gardens that the at-risk native species. It's called Sage Mountain.
Sage Mountain.
Sage Mountain Herbs, which is an odd name for it because it's in Vermont and sage doesn't grow there very well. But I somehow like the idea of this.
But you are the sage.
Well, that isn't what it was named for, no. But
She is the sage. She's trying to be modest.
I'm the
That's okay.
Rosemary on Sage Mountain. It was the idea of this mythological kind of creature that lived up in the mountains, you know, and that people would travel to the mountain to find the plants, you know, and to learn from the plants. So, and I could be a vehicle for that. Rosemary was a vehicle to the sage.
I love it.
Thank you.
I love it.
Thank you
Thanks so much, Rosemary,
Thank
for
you.
coming out
Thank you.
and spending some quality time with us. And hopefully
honor.
we'll be able to connect a lot more after this.
Thank you.
On and off camera, okay? Because I think she's pretty cool. Anyway, thanks so much for watching. Make sure you subscribe to our channel for more of these wonderful interviews and other shows. And thank you again, Rosemary.
Thank you.
And we'll see you next time.